Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. These people's eyes lighted up instantly and Q chuckled. Of course we must go deep into the southern borders and see if there are experts in the rebel army. We can't let these rebels look down on our imperial college. Poor monk will enlighten them with Buddhism, converting them into Buddhists and do good. Qin Mu shook his head secretly. These fellows had still underestimated the danger of this journey. This was a tough road to walk on and was a road that they might not finish walking even if they put their lives on the line. Our life and death is now up to fate. Let us see if Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, the #1 man under gods, lives up to his name. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor dressed light and headed to the south. Qin Mu led the rest to follow him while asking Cai Yunxiang about their encounters in this battle and couldn't help sighing ruefully again and again. The fate of Cai Yunxiang, Chen Wanyun, and the rest were much better than Qin Mu. They were also blown away by Juqian Devil King, but they didn't encounter abnormally strong practitioners like Long Jiaonan. The Dragon Chileen landed not far away from them, and since this Dragon Chileen was huge, they sprinted straight to where the Dragon Chileen was, and when the Heavenly Devil Horde descended, they surrounded the Dragon Chileen and started fighting. Meanwhile, this Dragon Chileen had also fought against the Heavenly Devil Horde that was surging over, and he had an astonishing battle prowess. Cai Yunxiang and the rest relied on his power to survive this calamity. Qin Mu was astonished and looked at this Dragon Chileen. Hu Linga whispered beside his ears, "Young master, big fella has been eating and drinking hours yet he didn't do anything on the journey here. It's even getting better now, protecting others and not protecting us. I think other than squeezing the dragon's saliva out from big fella, we can also squeeze other things out from him." "I also think so," Qin Mu nodded his head. He turned his head to look at Heavenwave City, which was getting further and further away. Now that Eternal Peace's army has entered the city, Long Jiaonan should die in the hands of the army, right? There's also the Dragon King of Dragon Rider sect who should be dead as well. A pity the unique spells of Dragon Rider sect are gone. Great Mountain sect is probably wiped out entirely as well. It's also a pity I didn't manage to learn the spells such as Devil Withdraw Command. When Juqian Devil King was summoned out by him, the Taoists of Great Mountain sect had rushed over and tried to use Devil Withdraw Command to chase Juqian Devil King back to Juqian. However, Juqian Devil King's ability was too powerful and wiped them out in one blow. However, Devil Withdraw Command was an extremely intricate spell that was specially used to deal with devils that were summoned out. If it was executed by a stronger person, they could indeed chase Juqian Devil King back. It's a pity that this spell was lost with the deaths of Great Mountain sect's followers. Heavenwave City was in a mess and the soldiers were still repairing the city walls. They swept the debris of the collapsed buildings and transferred them out of the city. On the river surface, thousands of ships and boats moved off and carried divisions of the army across the river. The army didn't stop at Heavenwave City and continued heading to the south. There were still soldiers in Heavenwave City capturing the remnants of the rebel army and surrounding the Heavenly Devil Horde from Juqian, discovering some commoners that had survived by luck in the process. There were soldiers taking the painting of bandits and walking through the commoners that had survived, comparing them one by one with the paintings. "This girl is born pretty." A soldier came to the side of a girl who was at a loss and exclaimed to himself. This girl was dressed in a dark green gown which hung until her feet and her hair was rolled up in a bun. She had beautiful features and the powder on her face was light. Her red lips were like two purple-red pearls and her long, shapely eyebrows were very fine. With one look, one would know she was a well-bred young lady from one of the big families in Heavenwave City. The soldier gave 2 looks before walking elsewhere. The girl's gaze was like spring water and a glistening red jade earring hung on her left ear. Suddenly, the earring moved and stretched its body. That earring was a little red snake which hung through her ear piercing. It looked like it was made from red jade, but it was actually a living thing. If Qin Mu was here, he will definitely command the soldiers to take down this woman. He had seen before the real face of Long Jiaonan. The whole body of Long Jiaonan had been seen by him when she was shedding her skin, and there was no makeup on this woman who had just crawled out from her skin. Now that she had regained her female get-up, She looked completely different from the pretty young master of Dragon Rider sect. The soldiers were currently moving the corpses in the city and throwing them onto the cart before pushing the cart to bury them outside the city. Long Jianan followed behind them while crying, "Sirs, is my father's corpse inside?" The few soldiers stopped and said, "Little maiden, there are too many corpses in the city, we don't know which one is your father. Do you see him on the cart?" Long Jianan took a look and shook his head, "No." A soldier said, "He's most likely in the burial mounds outside the city. General, you ordered us to dig a few huge pits there to bury the corpses. All the corpses were moved there and they haven't been covered up. Does little maiden want to follow us there to have a look?" Long Jianan gave her thanks and followed these soldiers to the burial mounds outside of the city. There was a huge pit dug up here which was dozens of yards deep and thousands of corpses were piled up here. Long Jianan raised her head and saw dozens of such huge pits other than this huge pit in the burial mounds. Beside the pit, there were soldiers that were pushing the carts forward and dumping the corpses into the pit. Long Jianan looked around and suddenly shouted, "Father, father! Daughter is here to find you. If you can hear me, please answer me." She shouted a few times and those soldiers didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This woman has most likely gone crazy. At this moment, a weak voice came from a huge pit, "I'm here, I'm currently shedding my skin but I was too heavily injured." The soldiers beside the huge pit were stupefied and an officer suddenly shouted, "There's something wrong. Everyone, on your guards." When Long Jianan heard this voice, she gave a hidden smile, "Xiao Hong." The incomparably tiny red snake hanging on her left ear stretched its body and dropped down from her ear. When it landed on the ground, its size increased all of a sudden and turned into a huge snake in a blink of an eye. Poisonous gas spewed out as it opened its mouth and the soldiers around the burial mounds collapsed here and there. The huge snake slithered like wind and swallowed the soldiers one by one. Meanwhile Long Jianan walked into the pit and threw the corpses aside. She finally dug out the Dragon King who was buried among the corpses. Daughter thought father had died. Long Jianan chuckled. "Daughter?" Dragon Rider sect's Dragon King snorted coldly. Long Jianan's expression changed slightly and lowered her head. "Son had thought father had died." The Dragon King sat up. "I feigned death by going into hibernation to bluff that devil god, thus I was thrown into this burial mound as a corpse. Not sure how Red Dragon is doing." He pinched his lips and gave off a low whistle. Not long later, a little monster, that seemed like a snake that was yet not a snake, a dragon that was yet not a dragon, crawled out from the forest. The Dragon King let out a sigh of relief and checked on the injuries of the Red Dragon. "Red Dragon and I have to shed our skins and rest for a period of time. Good son, I'll leave this period of time to you. Let us go." Long Jianan summoned the huge snake over and the demon gas surged out from the huge snake as it rose into the sky, carrying 2 humans and 1 dragon as it whooshed away. Only now did the soldiers in Heavenwave City reacted over, but it was too late for them to give chase. Who was the one who has created such a trouble which caused such a huge defeat? The Dragon King asked, "How many of us from Dragon Rider sect have survived?" "Only we're left." Long Jianan snorted coldly. "I've heard the scholars of Imperial College refer to him as Academician Qin. He was the one that had summoned the devil god and wiped out our Dragon Rider sect. It's a shame that your son is incapable and let him escape. We father and son are still alive, so Dragon Rider sect isn't considered completely wiped out." The Dragon King said coldly, "As long as we know who he is, things would be easy. Such an enmity, we have to take revenge. We must tear him into 1,000 pieces." Qin Mu and the rest followed Imperial Preceptor to the south, and not long after, the army has rushed forth from behind and passed by them as they headed forward. They continued walking at a steady pace. Qin Mu grabbed the chance to ask Imperial Preceptor for advice. "Imperial Preceptor is a wise man and student has one thing that I can't solve. May I ask Imperial Preceptor for advice?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor asked in astonishment, "Who did you learn your flattery from? You're pretty adept at it." Qin Mu was bewildered. "Is this considered flattery?" Yu Qinghong, Yun Qiu, Chen Wanyun and the rest nodded their heads repeatedly. Even Sai Yunxiang was nodding endlessly. Qin Mu muttered, "My elder taught me this." My elder is a cripple who is always smiling. His words are pleasant but his actions are ruthless. Let's not talk about this. Imperial Preceptor, I would like to ask you, in Spirit Embryo realm, the Spirit Embryo is very useful for the overall controlling of one's vital chi, but 5 elements realm seems a little. He gave some thoughts before continuing, a little weak. There seems to be great power in 5 elements realm, yet it's hard to unleash it. For example, there are 5 gods in 5 elements realm and each god has its own strong points. However, how can we let the 5-element divine treasure unleash its power? This question caught the attention of Chen Guanyin and the rest. They had also thought about Qin Mu's question before, but they had not come to a conclusion. 5-element realm was indeed a little weak compared to Spirit Embryo realm. Their cultivation had grown, but that was it had no qualitative leap. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was astonished. You guys haven't discovered the secret of 5 elements. Or should I say, Imperial College hasn't taught you guys. Qin Mu shook his head. Chen Guanyin and the rest also shook their heads. The directorates of this generation isn't capable. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor sighed ruefully. They don't even teach this now. The current directorates must be the lousiest directorates. 5 elements divine treasure is the 5 phases divine treasure. With 5 phases concealed inside, they correspond to the 5 element star sovereigns in the sky. These 5 gods are gods of the sovereign king level and not any minor gods. When you guys execute your techniques, do you feel an abnormality, an unknown energy going into your body from the sky, resonating with the 5 element star sovereigns? Everyone nodded repeatedly. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, this is the power of the 5 elements. Gold element corresponds to gold, fire element corresponds to fire, water element corresponds to water, wood element corresponds to wood, earth corresponds to earth. Activating these 5 kinds of energy could allow you to control the power of the 5 elements. Have the 5 element star sovereigns return to their own star palace. Everyone nodded their heads again. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor sighed. What Imperial College teaches is too shallow, too superficial. What do the directorates teach now? They don't even teach anything profound. 5-element star sovereign entering the star palace means you have mastered the power of the 5 elements, which is also the power of the 5 phases. As long as the power of the 5 elements integrates into your vital chi, there would be 5 more kinds of attributes in your vital chi. He raised his palm and a golden shield appeared in front of him, gold. Wood. After the golden shield disappeared, the vegetation around grew frantically. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, water. Huge waves then surged forward and lifted all of them up, allowing them to float in mid-air as they stepped on the waves. Fire. Fire clouds rose into the sky and carried Qin Mu and the rest up, allowing them to move forward on the fire clouds. Earth. The ground churned as countless mud and rocks floated into the sky to form a huge ball of earth. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor dispelled these 5 kinds of energy and everyone landed back on the ground gently. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, the power the 5 elements allows you to control is different from the power the Spirit Embryo allows you to control. It's different from the 4 kinds of vital chi, which are green dragon, vermilion bird, black tortoise and white tiger. These 4 kinds of vital chi can't be simply classified as wood, fire, water, gold, and instead, every kind of vital chi has 5 phases concealed inside. Why are you guys looking like you're listening to the heavenly book? You don't understand. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was bewildered and shook his head. The scholars of your batch is too dumb, the lousiest batch I have ever taught. Chen Guanyin and the rest received a huge blow and Cai Yunxiang also couldn't accept it. Qin Mu felt that it was not because they were too stupid but because Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was too clever. For an incomparable talent that appeared once every 500 years, he could understand any logic with just one explanation and one hint. He didn't even need others to guide him and he could naturally comprehend numerous reasons. However, other people didn't have his heaven-defying comprehension. There was a huge gap even between the talents. Even though Chen Guanyin and the rest were talents of 1 in 10,000s with outstanding aptitudes or outstanding comprehension, they were far inferior when compared to a monster that appears once every 500 years whose aptitudes and comprehension were the first in the world. Things that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor thought were simple actually needed them to calm down and comprehend. The difference in talent between Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and them was literally heaven and earth. Take Green Dragon Vital Chi as an example. Do you think Green Dragon Vital Chi is really the wood attribute? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor guided them patiently. Have you seen a real green dragon? I have, and the green dragon I saw could control the wind and lightning, fire and water, not just the wood attribute. Moreover, what's wood attribute? If you hug a plank and bite it twice, is that wood attribute? Don't assume Green Dragon Vital Chi has the wood attribute just because there's a green word in Green Dragon. If you assume that way, you really have a wooden head. Everyone was given another blow, and even Qin Mu felt a sense of setback. Even he who was learned had thought Green Dragon Vital Chi was the wood attribute, but thinking about it now, there was no trace of wood attribute when Old Ma executed Green Dragon Vital Chi. Instead, there was wind and lightning interweaving. Looked like there was indeed somewhat deviation from what he knew. Without Imperial Preceptor pointing it out, he would probably continue having the misconception. There are actually many techniques for 5 elements divine treasure that you can learn from. Some of them are specialized in opening the battle power of 5 elements divine treasure. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, the battle power of 5 elements realm is very astonishing, but it's also fine if you can't cultivate it. It won't affect you in breaking through other divine treasures. You will only be slightly weaker in the future. But this slight gap would gradually magnify as you grow, and the more divine treasure you open, the larger the gap will become. He drew 2 triangles in the sky. One had a smaller angle on the top and the other had a bigger angle on the top. He then drew 6 horizontal lines in the triangle and said, each of the 7 lines in the picture represents the power of each realm. The second line is the 5 elements realm. If you don't cultivate properly, the second line would be a little shorter than others, then the third line would be much shorter. When you reach the bottom of the triangle, which is the divine bridge realm, at that time, you will be shorter than the others by a whole chunk, and the difference in power is literally halved. If the opponent wants to kill you, he just needs 1 or 2 moves. His example was very direct and shook them. 2 people who clearly didn't have much difference in Spirit Embryo Realm and 5 Elements Realm actually had such a huge gap between them when they cultivated to Divine Bridge Realm. There were not many people who actually thought about this point and only cared about raising their cultivation realm. Sai Yunxiang suddenly asked, what's Imperial Preceptor's line? Compared to the other cult masters of Divine Bridge Realm, how big is your angle? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor drew a straight line in the sky and said indifferently, I'm this. No matter how strong other people's cultivation is, their angle will always be smaller than mine. He dared to say so because of his heaven-defying aptitudes and comprehension. He practically had no shortcomings. Other people were 7 parallel lines while his was 7 lines overlaying each other, which was much stronger than others. You can take reference from the techniques that are related to 5 elements divine treasure in Floor of Heavenly Record, such as Minutes of Suppressing Stars written by Elder Ru Xianqin, Struggle of the 5 Phases written by Monk Yuan Kong, and also 5 Laws of Jupiter written by Duke Wei, 5 Vitals of Military Discipline by General of Heavenly Strategies. After reading all of them, you will build a strong foundation for your 5 elements realm. These people he had mentioned were the first-ranking high officials of the current imperial court. Elder Xianqin was a woman who held the appointment as the Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince. Monk Yuan Kong held the appointment as Grand Marshal, and there was no need to mention about Duke Wei. General of Heavenly Strategies was the head of the reputable Qin family. These few people that were either born from aristocratic families or well-known, were all cult master-level existences that had reached the Divine Bridge realm. Everyone hurriedly memorized the names of the techniques down. Chen Wanyan felt a little contradictory. He had planned to enter 6 Directions realm directly after this experience, but after listening to Imperial Preceptor's words, he made up his mind to continue suppressing his realm. He would only break the 6 Directions wall after he returned to Imperial College and strengthened his foundation. Qin Mu was stunned. He suddenly thought of some techniques in Great Educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures which were specially used for cultivating 5 elements divine treasure. There was a wide array of techniques in Great Education Heavenly Devil Scriptures, and most of the techniques didn't look too intricate and couldn't be considered top-notch techniques. These techniques were usually imparted to the disciples. Almost all the techniques and divine arts in great educational heavenly devil scriptures were imparted out and weren't kept away because of its value. However, there were some techniques that were difficult to understand and were easy to cultivate wrongly, therefore they carried the reputation as a devil cult. Qin Mu originally didn't further study these techniques, but after Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's pointers, he instantly came to realize wasn't the techniques that seemed standalone in great educational heavenly devil scriptures the secret to cultivation? These techniques that seemed scattered and not powerful didn't only consist of the method to cultivate 5 elements realm. There were probably the techniques for 6 directions realm, 7 stars realm and even celestial being, life and death, and divine bridge. These techniques were learned by each hall master of heavenly devil cult before imparting down to the followers and thus formed the 360 halls. Qin Mu had treated these techniques as weak and didn't incorporate them into unity technique. Now the unintentional words from Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had instead pointed out a clear path to him. Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique has technique but no skills. It has inadequacies. But it might just be a perfect combination if combining it with great educational heavenly devil scriptures. Qin Mu was filled with excitement and immediately comprehended the cultivation methods of 5 elements realm. These 5 methods were Saturn Sovereign's Earth Marquis True Technique, Jupiter Sovereign's Wood Marquis True Technique, Mercury Sovereign's Water Marquis True Technique, Mars Sovereign's Fire Marquis True Technique and Venus Sovereign's Gold Marquis True Technique. Not long after, he started to try to merge these 5 true techniques into the 5 elements realms technique of Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique. Yu Qinghong and the rest were consulting sword skills from Imperial Preceptor and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor chatted as they walked, saying everything that he knew. However, before they could comprehend it, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had already moved to the next point, which vexed them. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's explanation wasn't considered fast. It was just hard for them to comprehend immediately and had to spend the time to slowly comprehend it. However, they didn't dare to clarify it as they were afraid they would be once again crowned as the lousiest class. After Yu Qinghong had consulted him about sword skills, Monk Yun Q asked him about Buddhist skills. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also had attainments on Buddhist skills and had entered Great Thunderclap Monastery before to consult Old Rulai. His speech naturally was like a deluge of heavenly flowers. After Yun Q had consulted him, Chen Wanyun asked him about the fusion of sword skills and battle techniques. After he cultivated with Chancellor Ba Shan for a period of time, Chancellor Ba Shan had imparted 7 ways of the hegemon to him and also gave him pointers on the cultivation of his sword skills, thus Chen Wanyun had walked down the path of cultivating both knife and sword. Sai Yinxiang also consulted Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor some questions on cultivation and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor paid more attention to her, explaining in detail and slightly more than others. When Sai Yinxiang followed the young patriarch to cultivate, she had met him a few times and got his pointers in the past. The wolf slave hesitated for a moment and puckered up his courage to consult knife skills from him. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor took a look at him and asked, "Warrior of Wolf Store Country?" The wolf slave nodded his head in anxiousness. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was unconcerned and said, "Education is for everyone, irrespective of background, I don't care what race you are." After he had said that, he gave him pointers for his sword skills and didn't hide anything he knew, not stopping before he had said it through. Not long after, everyone fell silent as they were comprehending his words without a sound. Even though Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor didn't say much, it was enough for them to comprehend for a while. "Imperial Preceptor, have you studied demon cultivation before?" Hu Linga broke the silence as she asked him on Dragon Chiling's head. Eternal Peace shook his head, "Never did." Hu Linga's eyes lighted up and said with a crisp voice, "I can teach you." She looked very serious. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also asked seriously, "May I ask for your guidance?" Hu Linga told him about what she had learned through cultivation and told him about the knowledge she had learned from the collection of books from Surging River Dragon Palace. She even told him about spirit creation technique which was mixed with her own comprehension. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor listened silently and when Hu Linga was finished, he suddenly asked, "The demon race has no divine treasure. Hearing about what you have learned through cultivation, there was no cultivation related to divine treasure. Hu shook her head and replied, "We don't, therefore we have to work hard to cultivate to a human form. Once we have a human form, we would be a demon king, which is very powerful. I've also seen a few demon kings before and they indeed have unusual abilities." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, "The spirit techniques you mentioned earlier to change your form was very interesting. This technique seems to have countless changes." He explained spirit creation technique in detail and Hu became more and more enthralled. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was done, she then came back to her senses and cried out in astonishment, "I said just now that I wanted to teach you, how did it become you're teaching me?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, "We teach each other." Yen. Hu nodded her head heavily. The dragon chilling under her but snorted and rolled his eyes. At this moment, lights actually appeared in the sky which flew towards them. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor took a look and his gaze landed on Qin Mu's body. Those lights gathered and entered Qin Mu's body from the top of his head. More and more lights appeared and gradually turned into a slender flow of light that had a fire-red color. Hu gave a touch and a tuft of fur on her paw was burned. She immediately pulled back her paw. Not long after, Qin Mu's aura increased exponentially and flames poured out from his body, surrounding him like fire clouds. Hu was still astonished when she heard two popping sounds as two bull horns grew out from his head. His nostrils started to gradually rise and pushed outwards, spewing out two trails of white smoke which carried flames. Hu cried out in astonishment and heard two cracking sounds as the bones in Qin Mu's bone transformed bizarrely. His thighs became thicker and his body also grew taller. His muscles started bulging outwards and flame markings covered his entire body. A bullseye popped out on his forehead right at the heart of his brows. Hu then saw a bull's tail drooping down behind Qin Mu's buttocks which had also become larger, looking like the large and firm buttocks of a bull. His tail whipped twice on the firm buttocks which she reckoned was very painful. Imperial Preceptor. Hu was stunned for a moment before turning her head to tell Imperial Preceptor, "My young master has revealed his true form." His true form? He's not a fox demon, he's a bull demon. This is not a demon but a kind of god transformation, to transform into the shape of gods. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was used to this sight and explained to Hu He naturally could see that this wasn't Qin Mu revealing his true form and was a peculiar technique instead. It seemed to be the effect by merging a few techniques of Heavenly Devil sect together. It seems to be spirit creation technique merging with the Mars technique of 5 elements realm. He had little knowledge about great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures so he wasn't too sure. Qin Mu's body shape shifting was considered god transformation and some techniques could achieve that as well. It wasn't rare and it was one type of body divine arts. The techniques of some sects specially relied on god transformation and devil transformation to upgrade their bodies. However, Qin Mu's god transformation made Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor puzzled. It didn't seem like it was just a body divine art. Body divine art was naturally used to upgrade one's body and relied on one's strong body to increase their battle ability. Whereas Qin Mu's god transformation seemed to be god transformation. In Imperial Preceptor's eyes, Qin Mu relied on his technique to turn himself into the appearance of Mars Sovereign. When his corporeal body changed, his vital chi also changed at the same time. Even the aura he was giving off has also changed. Which also means he obtained the body and the divine arts under the state of god transformation. Now this was very strange. The transformation on Qin Mu's body had yet stopped and fire clouds churned under his feet, gradually turning into 2 fire dragons. The fire dragons became longer and larger, lifting his body from the ground. Qin Mu stepped on the fire dragons and his feet ripped apart his shoes as they turned into 2 flaming hooves. For him now was like Mars Sovereign who was stepping on 2 fire dragons. Qin Mu raised his hand and the surroundings instantly became incomparably dry as fireballs that were the size of goose's egg flew around in the sky. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor gave off an interested expression as he looked at these fireballs that were neither too big nor too small. Suddenly, sword lights which were formed by fine flames burst forth from each and every one of the fireballs. Each sword light was executing sunset sword skill and there was also the power of fire attribute spells in the sword skill at the same time, therefore the power of each sword wasn't weak at all. Sunset sword skill of Yu in Empire, very orthodox, which also has the marvel of sword pellets. Combining the power of the spells, your strength could basically be compared to a divine arts practitioner's. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor side, if you clash face to face with a divine arts practitioner of Six Directions realm, you won't die. If you can unleash the body divine out of God transformation, you can rival divine arts practitioners of Six Direction realm. Qin Mu's sword skill retracted and returned to the fireballs. The fireballs collided with one another, forming a red sun that was as huge as a basin. He then opened his mouth to swallow that red sun into his mouth, spewing 2 trails of flames from his bull's nose. He stopped executing Overlord Body 3 elixir technique and the 2 bull's horns on his head gradually shrank. His body also slowly returned to normal and the 2 fire dragons under his feet slowly dispersed. Qin Mu touched his buttocks and gave off a puzzled expression. There was a searing pain on his buttocks as if someone had whipped his a few times. Could it be that I'm used to herding cows ever since I was young, therefore I like to whip the buttocks of a cow? The cowherd boy from disabled elderly village thought suspiciously to himself. There was a mighty mountain in front where the waterfall fell from the sky which seemed like an upside-down Milky Way. The white color of the waterfall, the black color of the cliff, the greenery of the mountain peak, and the sun hanging over their heads formed an ink painting of the mountain and river. The sound of the water was deafening and there was dense water vapor traveling over. Fine mist was everywhere in the air, which landed on everyone's body, making their clothes slightly damp after a while. This place made people feel delighted and relaxed. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor brought them to the southern borders and didn't take any official path. They determined the direction and continued walking, which had now brought them to the mountains. The waterfall formed a deep pool which was clear and there was a buck with branching horn beside the pool, swaying its short tail and eating the turf grass. There were white spots with the shape of plum blossom on its body. When it saw them walking over, the buck immediately raised its head and sized them up while taking 2 steps forward. Everyone exclaimed handsome secretly. This buck was about the same size as the dragon Qin, looking very majestic. That buck puffed from its nostrils and came to the side of the pool. There was an elder in woven rush raincoat beside the pool and he stabbed his fishing pole on the shore to fish. There was a child beside this elder, who was older than a kid but younger than a teenager. He picked up stones in boredom and threw at where the elder's hook was. This child didn't just throw 1 or 2 pieces, instead, he kept throwing. This waterfall was so huge and the current was so urgent, even if there was fish, they wouldn't eat the bait. Plus the fact that this child was throwing rocks continuous into consideration, this elder didn't need to think of catching anything today. Yu Qinghong shook his head. This child is his own, otherwise he would have smacked him to death. Who can endure this? Qin Mu revealed a puzzled expression and looked around. This wasn't a fishing spot and yet there was an elder fishing here. There was a child throwing rocks at the hook. No matter how he looked, this elder didn't seem to be here for fishing. In such wilderness where footprints were rare, they could only be blocking the way if they weren't fishing. In addition to this plum blossom buck that was no inferior to the dragon Qin, the identity of this elder was probably in existence on the same level as the young patriarch. Chen Wanyan and Sai Yunxiang also noticed something wrong and looked towards Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Monk Yun Q didn't think so much and went up to inquire with a smile, "Elder, how could there be fish here? This must be your grandson, right? With your grandson throwing the rocks continuously, even if there's fish, they would have been spooked." The elder raised his head and revealed a face full of wrinkles while smiling. "How come there no fish? Didn't the fish just arrive?" Yun Q looked towards his hook and didn't see any fish. He only saw that brat still throwing rocks. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor came forward and said cynically, "Even though this pool isn't big, the fish isn't small and would be hard to catch. I wonder if Elder has the ability to." Wrinkles creased up on the elder's face as he smiled. This world was originally a pool of clear water. A big fish came to stir up this water. This huge fish should have jumped through the dragon's gate to become a true dragon, yet it not only stirred up the water but also wanted to eat the small fishes, clearing them all. Imperial Preceptor, you decide, should I fish up this big fish or not? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's gaze flickered and said at a speed that neither fast nor slow, "Isn't it a little inappropriate for Elder to compare sects to small fishes, am I right? Sects should be leeches, leeches that cling onto the bodies of fishes. Even though the water looks clear, the fishes in the water are all bitten by the leeches, and in that case, we shouldn't fish and instead, we should drug and get rid of the leeches." The Elder did not speak another word. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor didn't speak as well. When words get sour, saying any more was useless. They had already said a few sentences and felt that they couldn't convince each other, so it was useless if they continued talking. Since their ideals were different and they can't convince each other, it would be better to eradicate the other side and be much more straightforward and refreshing to just destroy the other side's ideal. That Elder got up and pulled out his fishing rod and line. Placing the fishing rod vertically upwards beside a huge tree, he took down his straw hat and woven rush raincoat. He waved his hand to signal the brat beside him to move back, go to the mountainside. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said to Qin Mu and the rest, "Go past the mountain and wait for me there." "Elder, have you passed down your abilities?" That Elder nodded. "I've passed them down." "What about Imperial Preceptor?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said indifferently, "I have no need. I was too hot-headed in my early days and killed too many people, eradicating too many sects. This resulted in many unique skills of numerous sects being lost. This was something I often regret after setting up Floor of Heavenly Records, therefore from then on, I would always have the habit to ask this before I kill people." Even though Qin Mu wanted to stay and witness this battle that was rarely seen, the blast from the collision of existences at the level of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would probably be even more violent than Duchian Devil King. If he observed the battle from such a close distance, he was sure to die. "Let us cross the mountain," Qin Mu said sternly. He brought everyone up to this high mountain and looked down. The two people below the waterfall had been covered up by the mist and couldn't be seen clearly. The brat throwing the rock was riding the huge buck and was not far away from them. He blinked his eyes innocently. "You guys are from Imperial College?" Chen Wanyan nodded his head and asked, "How do I address brother?" "Muren, Wang Muren." His age was similar to Qin Mu, but he presented a different steadiness when compared to Qin Mu. This Wang Muren was extremely active and couldn't sit still. He would feel bored the moment he became silent. He couldn't stay still even when riding the huge buck, slapping the buck's butt to run over. Qin Mu asked, "Which sect is Brother Wang from?" "Little Jade Capital." "Little Jade Capital?" Chen Wanyan, Yun Q, and the rest were slightly at a loss. They had not heard about this sect before. There were 3 big sacred grounds in Eternal Peace Empire and some large-scale sects that were not inferior to the 3 big sacred grounds, however, Little Jade Capital wasn't among them. Qin Mu was stunned. The 2 words, Jade Capital, weren't words anyone could use. Jade Capital referred to the capital city where the Celestial Emperor lived, and this Celestial Emperor wasn't God and was an immortal, the Celestial Emperor of Immortals. Which sect was so daring to take the name, Little Jade Capital? There are very little people living in the sacred ground of our Little Jade Capital. They were all mainly old men and old women. There aren't many that are of the same age as me. Wang Muren said, "This time there was someone who came to visit and found my master. He asked my master to pay a visit to Imperial Preceptor, saying that Imperial Preceptor was walking the path of the devil and wanted to eradicate all the sects in the world. My master was originally unwilling to do it, but it was hard for him to turn down a friend's request, therefore he had brought me out to take a look around. The sects in this world have already been nearly eradicated by Imperial Preceptor, and his actions are indeed no different from the devil." Hu Linga was bewildered, on with the righteous side. "I feel Imperial Preceptor's actions are very righteous." Wang Muren shook his head. "You are all hawks and hounds of the Imperial Court, the claws and teeth of Imperial Preceptor, having a very bad reputation." Qin Mu was puzzled. He felt Imperial Preceptor's action was still okay and righteous. Furthermore, Imperial Preceptor also had an air of righteousness, and everything he did seemed normal and righteous to Qin Mu. How did it turn into the path of the devil in other people's eyes? Furthermore, how did they, the Imperial scholars, become the hawks and hounds of the Imperial Court, the claws and teeth of Imperial Preceptor, having a bad reputation. Righteous and evil, it's maybe just a matter of how you see it. Qin Mu thought to himself. Hu Linga asked, Muren, if your master dies, what would you do? Wang Muren was brimming with confidence while shaking his head. No one can kill my master, his abilities. At this moment, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor walked over and said to Wang Muren, go and retrieve your master's body. Before he died, he had told me he had passed down all his abilities to you. This is very good, cultivate well. Wang Muren was stunned and he suddenly jumped off the buck's back to sprint towards the waterfall. A moment later, his whales traveled over. Lit Jade Capital is pretty remarkable. I've heard of this sect that has some connections with the heavens above. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, Lee City is right ahead, I'm injured so you will have to grab some herbs to treat me. Qin Mu nodded his head. Imperial Preceptor's injury is difficult to treat, the medicine I prescribe would definitely be very complicated. This video will end here.